Now, in our first story, the Ghana Cocoa Board has announced that it will not for the first time in 3 decades raise money through offshore syndicated loan to finance the purchase of cocoa beans for the 2024-2025 crop season, targeting about 650,000 metric tons of cocoa beans for the season. Cocoa Board said it will be able to finance the purchase from its internal operations. The following report has more.
Speaking at a press briefing, Chief Executive Joseph Boyne-Adu said there is an elaborate plan to win Cocoa Board off loans with high interest rates from offshore lenders. He emphasized that it is not financially prudent for Cocoa Board to continue relying on loans from international banks when it has the capacity to directly raise money from the country at a relatively cheaper rate to buy the beans.
I will say that for the first time in the history of Ghana Cocoa Board wants to win itself from the offshore syndication. We want to be self-financing. Since 1992, Cocoa Board has been going offshore to borrow from a syndication of banks, or a consortium of banks. And 32 years, I think, is quite a good time for any human being to learn his or her lessons. 32 years, we've learned our lessons, and we think that it's high time, we weaned ourselves from the offshore international financial market, and then, finance the crop.
Mr. Boyne-Adu insisted that Cocoa Board can self-finance its operations and purchases, provided all the proceeds it will accrue to the government of Ghana for other developmental projects. Defending the decision, he stressed that MOVE has received all the support of major stakeholders in the sector to make the farmer the ultimate beneficiary in the value chain.
We've studied the market for the longest while, and we've come to understand the market. I'm not a trader, but right now when I'm speaking, you might think that I'm a trader, because we've come to understand all the intricacies in the market, and not just the trade, but even the financials, And you all agree that if you've been doing syndication for 32 years, do you have to continue to be in the same situation? You don't change. You don't change. I don't think so. You have to change. So now we've taken the decision that we've studied everything and come to the conclusion that it's time for us to change. And last year we were, if anything, it was even last year when we started. How come last year we went to the traders? So it's not that maybe it's out of desperation no. Last 2 years, those who followed my stories, last 2 years I was in the Govt. Looking for money.
Meanwhile, Mr. Boyne-Adu announced that the 2024-2025 crop season will start from 1st September this year.
According to Boyne, it is time for change. Let's get on to Zoom and discuss this further with an economist, Professor Patrick Esumin. Welcome to the show, sir. Doc.
Good evening, and good evening to viewers. Thanks for having me.
Great. Prof, what do you make of Cocoa Board's decision not to turn to international market to raise funds for cocoa purchase?
Great idea. I think it's a great idea. I don't know why it has taken us this long to realize that this is what we should be doing. Because every time you go out there and take these syndicated loans, we end up paying a huge value of the cocoa that has been produced by hardworking farmers out to them. I think my only wonder is why we have been going through this for long and we didn't do this early. I'm sure there could be, especially at the beginning, there could be some challenges, but I think whatever support that can be provided to COCOBOD to make this work, we should let it happen, because this is, I think, it's the best thing I've heard from COCOBOD.
Prof, there are some who think that COCOBOD is being forced to do this because they have been rejected, they have actually been rejected by international banks or not so good financial position. For where you sit, could that be the case?
Well, I mean, it seems like that might be the case. If you look at the trouble that we had last year getting the syndicated done, and then also the problem that the cocoa production itself has suffered, I think you could see that maybe COCOBOD's hand has been somewhat forced. But for me, that's not the point. I think hard times should force you to make long-lasting reforms. And so, as far as I'm concerned, whether it's because they're struggling to raise the funds or whatever they got here, we are here. And I think that's the most important thing. We have to look forward and make sure that this thing works, that we no longer go out there to seek that syndicated loan, and we're able to be self-financing. That way, we are going to be able to retain more value from the cocoa production.
Prof, however, these inflows have played an important part in Bank of Ghana's dollar reserves, and it will be factored into our end-of-year projection. So should we be worried based on this recent announcement?
Not at all. So I think here's the difference, the way I see it. The syndicating will bring us more dollar inflow in a short space of time. So maybe you do it at the payout time, $1 billion hit your account. But when you export the cocoa, then that $1 billion has to be paid out. Don't forget that we are paying it with high interest. So cumulatively, we will actually get more dollars, except that it won't come at a single inflow. So as we export, then the dollars come in. But cumulatively, we should get more dollars than if you do the syndication, except that when you do the syndication, you get a chunk of dollars coming in at a short period. But I think this is still better.
Okay, Doc, you mentioned about cumulative cases. Now, based on this recent announcement as well, could this be bad news for the city going forward, or will it have any negative impact on the currency in the medium to short long term?
If it will, it should be in the short term, not in the medium term. Like I said, so maybe every September or October, we know we are going to get $1 billion coming. This time that won't happen. But as we buy the cocoa and we export them, the inflows will trickle in. So I think if people are looking at in the very, very short term, yes, I mean, people who are
Prof, please, can you unmute if you can, please? Okay, we'll try to bring Prof back on this particular conversation. Prof, can you still hear us?
Yes, so sorry, I was saying that over the medium to longer term, it will mean that we are actually going to receive more USD. So I think this is going to be better.
Okay, Prof. Prof, please still stay on. We'll be back after this particular story. Government has revealed that it might be forced to embark on some emergency expenditure cuts to help meet the end-year budget deficit target. This was contained in a letter to IMF as part of measures to maintain prudent spending this election year. George Biafre has the rest of the story.
ETA maintained that this decision will be guided by the country's revenue situation in the last quarter of this year. This is one of several actions that government is implementing to demonstrate its commitment to staying within the approved budget for this year. It also added that it will not hesitate to embark on this expenditure cut, the larger interest of stabilizing the economy. However, it will first look at rationalizing spending as an immediate measure before it looks at cutting the budget to ensure that the end-of-year deficit is not compromised. Government is also promising that it will push hard to improve revenue. This is because all these policy measures will be largely influenced by how the state is performing when it comes to tax collections and other revenue measures.
Let's go back to Professor Prof. Just a quick one. What do you also make of government's decision to embark on some expenditure cuts to help achieve the end-of-year budget deficit?
Well, I think it's great to hear. The optics sounds great. That the government is going to do all it takes to ensure that we, in an election year, we don't go beyond our threshold and our limit. We don't mess all the gains that we have apparently made from the IMF program because of the election. I think it's great to hear. I think I am a little skeptical, or I want to be optimistic, but you should pardon me for being very cynical about this. I think this government has consistently struggled to cut expenditure. In the middle of, when we are deciding, how to bring our fiscal deficit in line, we decided to lean more towards revenue than cutting expenditure. And it has announced before, in the lead up, during the e-levy debate, the government announced that we are going to cut discretionary spending by 30%. They couldn't do it. So, I like to be positive, but, I think as a researcher, when I've had many years of evidence, it's hard for me to simply take a promise made at this point. But, if he's able to do it, that would be great. In particular, if the revenues are not coming in, and then we need to rationalize expenditure. But I think it's also important to know what exactly are we going to cut. Because, what discretion do we have? Our obligations are taking a chunk of what we have to pay. We can't refuse to pay salaries. We have to honor our interest obligations. That takes out almost all the revenue. So when you hear this, it means that maybe it's capital expenditure we are going to cut. But in the election period, we've heard a lot of promises about roads that will be done.
All right.
And even some expenditure about paying additional 1.5 billion for other things. So I don't know. I like to believe that this will happen. If it happens, it will be great. I'm a little skeptical.
All right, Prof, we appreciate your time here on Business Live. We would absolutely come back to you on subsequent bulletin. And now, away from that, the Minister of State at the Finance Ministry, Abena Osei Asare, insists revenue measures being proposed by the new Patriotic Party's candidate, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, will improve compliance and take in more revenue. According to the Member of Parliament for Etiwa East constituency, the proposed reforms will not affect the current IMF arrangement, but improve the country's domestic revenue base. She spoke at the 12th Annual International Conference in Accra.
The annual International Tax Conference creates a unique platform for policymakers, academia, and tax professionals to share ideas on improving the country's tax regime. Ghana is under pressure to improve its domestic revenue inflows, hence the need to deepen conversations on the country's tax net. Ahead of the 2024 elections, government is confident that proposed tax reforms by the Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, will improve tax compliance and thereby increase the country's domestic revenue. Abena Osei Asare, Minister of State at the Finance Ministry, insists that government is on course to improve its domestic revenue mobilization targets.
And in encouraging people to comply with these taxes, you don't necessarily have to increase taxes, but then you broaden the base. Once you broaden the base, if you broaden the base and you even tweak your taxes downwards, it can go a long way to improve and then raise revenue. So that is what we are focused on this time, promoting more of efficient measures to increase the taxes. And that is why we want to hammer more on the digitalization aspects.
The Commissioner General of the Ghana Revenue Authority, Julie Esiam, called for the simplicity of tax policies to enhance compliance.
Tax policies must therefore be flexible enough to grow and optimize tax revenues in tandem with private sector development. These policies must be simple and easy to understand by everyone and all of us. As we look into the future, as a revenue authority, the Ghana Revenue Authority, we believe that the future tax policy should focus on the simplification of tax handles.
On his part, President of the Chartered Institute of Taxation, Ghana, George Ohenekwetia, advocated a national tax policy to address challenges.
If you have a true national tax policy, that national tax policy will drive the tax agenda. And hence, if it is something that we put in place, and every government has to respect it, we will not be getting changes in our tax regimes based on the whims of any given or new government.
The 3-day tax conference is on the theme Balanced Tax Policy and Private Sector Development. The 3-day tax conference is on the theme Balancing Tax Policy and Private Sector Development.
So that'll be all for business update here on Business Live. Now, if you get more story, visit myjournalline.com. You see one story, no offshore syndicated loan for 2024-2025 cocoa crop season. And also, Cocoa Board isn't borrowing from foreign banks. It's not credit worthy. That'll be all here on Business Live. My name is Winston Taki. Goodbye for now.